Mr. Hathaway, and if I give you guys a signal, it's just, you know, I want to get a lot of ground to cover in a short time. Mr. Hathaway, you and I have discussed at length the issue of, you know, you've been here, you're a longtime commissioner and vice mayor, and I think there was this thought that maybe you would be pushing and staying on Canal as part of a new CRA. Could you clarify for the public where you stand with that now, and do you think it could change? Could the community here have you change your mind between now and if you got elected?
No, I have not. The reality of it is Canal Street and Flagler Avenue have received incremental tax dollars from the CRA for the last 30 years. And they've done a marvelous job with redoing the streets, redoing the buildings. We've got new businesses, we've got new impetus on those streets. And it's time for these business owners to stand on their own 2 feet. It's time to take those CRA dollars and move to other blighted areas, which is US 1, and in fact US 1 corridor all the way through Edgewater, where both cities have already talked about doing that.
And would you support that all the way up to Woman? Because that's the other plan I've heard, from all the way down US 1.
I absolutely would. It
makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense, but you also understand each of us as cities are independent. We each have our own, how we want it to look. But yes, I would encourage that.
Mr. Kennedy, like you, I know what it feels like to be beaten up and the new guy on the block in the media, so to speak, especially the electronic media. There's been great projects on Canal, Badcock Building. When that's restored and rebuilt like that, that's going to be pretty sharp looking. The Penny Saver Building looks like doesn't look like an old post office. It looks like something kind of nice. Bed racing, Christmas on Canal. The one thing that I've been really harping on, the drinking on Flagler, especially the beer bottles at night when there's, you know, mixing of a block party with children and that kind of thing. How are you as a county councilman going to be convinced that we need another CRA when you see this kind of blend?
Well, I believe, just as Commissioner Hathaway stated, I mean, I think Canal has done a wonderful job of redeveloping itself, and it's time to move on into other areas. And to answer your question, I think that what I just said fits that, and that once the job is done, yes, there's some marketing efforts that need to get it going, kind of a kickoff, a grand opening, but at some point, businesses and property owners and whatnot have to get off the public dole and be able to sustain themselves. Otherwise, it's a welfare operation. And if we continue to revamp CRAs, I heard early in in the city debate, to keep those, because those businesses depend on those CRA dollars. Gosh, I'd love to have a tax subsidy. My family could surely use the money, but that's not the way it works, and that's not the way to keep businesses throughout sustainable, at least for a number of years. Then if they go down, new businesses come up, and you have that churn of economic growth going on. CRA dollars are not meant to subsidize and keep business. They're made for redevelopment of blighted areas. And just like in any business function, you're going to spend a certain percent on marketing, and you're going to expect a certain return on those marketing dollars. And the bed racing and the events and stuff, I would characterize as marketing dollars, and they're necessary. But at this point, I think it's time to start weaning that off, and let's focus on where we're going to spend the rest of the dollars, or where New Smyrna Beach would spend the rest of the dollars, because as Commissioner Hathaway says, it's their baby, and it's their flavor, and it's up to them to make it that way. But as a county taxpayer living in Edgewater, or if I lived elsewhere in the county, we still pay that. We all pay for these CRAs. CRAs have become the norm in redevelopment dollars. That's one of the reasons why our millage rates are as high as they are, because we really do spend money on redevelopment. They say there's no money for this, that, and the other, but there is in CRAs. Port Orange has a CRA that's ripe with cash. They're just not spending it like New Smyrna is. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think New Smyrna should be spending. That's what they're for. But we're all funding these CRAs. The only city in the county that doesn't have a CRA is Edgewater. And look at our US 1, and that's why it looks the way it is. Now, we've applied for one. We hope to get one. If we don't get one in Edgewater, then we're the ones that are paying the subsidy to everybody else without any return on our investment.
All right, Mr. Hathaway, this is something I'm going to probably delve into more with the next group of people, but I think you're in a good position to answer this. What do you do when you have a county manager that has a huge salary, big pension, and his SUV gets stolen while he's attaching his private boat? What message does that send, and how long do we continue with that kind of situation, especially in this economy?
You know, it's up to a member of the council, I would assume in this particular council, the chair sat down and negotiated the contract with an attorney to give Mr. Deneen what he has received. And then it's ratified by the entire council. The argument then goes to who is responsible. Well, you give someone a salary, you give someone the extra benefits. You know, the argument is, where do you draw the line? You've got a county roughly of 500,000 people, and the man probably gets in the neighborhood with his perks and so on and so forth around 300K, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But the issue is that an overpayment for a CEO when you look at other companies of like size or proportion? Do I condone the fact that Mr. Deneen left his vehicle running with keys in it or with keys in it while he was locking his boat? Absolutely not. And I'm sure that Mr. Deneen has rethought that process himself, knowing that he would not make that mistake again. But when you're in a fenced-in yard and you think that things are safe, you find out they're
understood. But do you think that maybe, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, I'm trying to get the thought process here, but do you think that maybe that sends a wake-up call that, hey, you know, you're a county manager, tow your boat with your own damn car? What do you say?
Well, I'm not so sure that the county manager or city managers need an SUV to get around the county or their cities. I think that, you know, in light of the fact that the fuel prices, even though they're relatively down at this point in time and getting ready to go back up, I would think we would try to find a vehicle that can get someone around the community that doesn't require that type of fuel and expense.
Mrs. Denny's, are you going to take his SUV away? Seriously.
I don't know that that's priority one, is in my checkoff list, should I be a county council member, but what's interesting in this whole discussion, you alluded to how much he's making and the perks and the benefits. I think that has a very real parallel in the District 3 race, because if you look at salaries and how much a county manager or a county attorney or a city attorney is paid. For example, in New Smyrna Beach, our city attorney makes well over $200,000 for a city the size of 20,000. What's interesting in Miami, with a population over 400,000, that's 200% more than New Smyrna. Their attorney is paid $297,000. But here's what's interesting about that. It used to be over $400,000 in Miami, but this is what their city council said. Her package will be more in line with somebody of her equivalent stature, not only in relation to other attorneys in Florida, but also in comparison with the private sector. So if you want to put an agenda item out there and we want to look at how decisions are made, it's not the SUV as such, because that's so minuscule, but you look at a form of governing. You know, how can the municipality of New Smyrna Beach, in my humble opinion, justify paying a city attorney this much? So the SUV at the county level is minuscule.
We'll get to that in a second. I would like to ask the audience collectively, is the SUV important when you're making over $200,000 and you got a big pension coming to you and you're struggling to pay your rent? That's what I thought. Mr. Hathaway, obviously that's a reference to you, the city attorney. Why don't you clarify for us what happened where you had to make that deal? And in hindsight, do you regret it? I know you were one of several votes and the others aren't on the commission anymore, you and Ms. Plaskett.
Well, let me take you back to 2004 when the city commission then voted to dismiss Mr. Beasley in the middle of a meeting. That was a 3-2 vote to dismiss him. I chose to vote to keep him, as did then Mayor Vandergrift. Mr. Beasley immediately left the building. We had no legal counsel at the city of New Smyrna Beach at that particular point in time for the rest of the evening or for the rest of that night, for that matter of fact. And we then had to turn to our city manager who is also married to an attorney, used to be the city attorney of New Smyrna Beach. She is currently the city attorney for Port Orange. Asked for his expertise in finding us someone to fill in while we were looking for an attorney. We turned to the law firm of Ansay, Doran and Ansay. Carolyn Ansay was the prime attorney that was helping at New Smyrna Beach. We're in the middle of a lawsuit, a First Amendment lawsuit, which is a federal lawsuit, because of someone who wanted to put a, if you will, a porn shop on US 1 and Wayne Avenue. It's an expensive lawsuit. It takes people with specialty to handle that type of lawsuit. In the 6 months that Ms. Ansay and Doran's firm represented the city of New Smyrna Beach, they racked up over $140,000 worth of billable hours. And it did not allow the city commissioners to have ample access, because every time you picked up the phone to ask the attorney a question, you were on a clock and it was ticking and you were paying a bill. We couldn't afford that. So we turned to our city manager and said, we need to run an ad for an experienced attorney to help us out with that particular federal lawsuit that we were involved in at that particular point in time. And Mr. Gummy was one of those that answered our call in terms of putting in his resume. Mr. Gummy also said, you're going to have to pay me what I'm making now if I'm going to come to New Smyrna Beach. Mr. Gummy was a former attorney for the city of Daytona Beach for over 20 years, very well experienced. Mr. Gummy was also hired by the county of Volusia to be an assistant county attorney, and that was the salary we agreed to. In 2004, New Smyrna Beach was flush. New Smyrna Beach was making money head over fist, wrong or right. That was a decision that the contract came forward. Mr. Gummy has since that time not only has saved us the dollars and cents in that federal lawsuit, we've had multiple lawsuits, including the lawsuit that would have come about if we didn't correct the problem that happened with our DCA issues from our own planners.
The planning fiasco.
Absolutely. Our own planners failed to forward information they needed to forward to the state, and as such, our comprehensive plan was out of whack. It did not meet with what was required by law. The commission was completely in the dark on this. We found out after the fact, and we could have been sued by Walmart, we could have been sued by the hotel on Flagler Avenue, we could have been sued by a number of people, and we would have been out there in a big way. And it takes an experienced attorney that knows who to contact in Tallahassee to resolve these issues in a quick manner, and Mr. Gummy has done so. So if you look at the dollars and cents that the city has paid out to this gentleman, believe me, the amount of money we've saved by the lawsuits that didn't occur is justified.